I'm going to install a heater in my van. In my last van, I had a diesel heater. It was a cheap Chinese diesel heater and it did not work super well. There were several drawbacks to that. One of them is that I had to have a separate diesel tank for my heater that I always had to make sure was full, and the only way for me to check it was to go under my hood, lift up the hood, unscrew the thing, and look in to see if I had any diesel in the tank. So that was annoying, but even more annoying was that it just didn't work very well. For one thing, if you run it at altitude, it'll clog up something in there and make it so that it just stops working when you're at elevation, which is typically when you want the heater the most. And even aside from that, it was just really finicky. Even right out of the box, the fan wouldn't spin properly. I had to like wedge out the portion of the heater that actually blows out air to make it work at all. But even after fixing that, I always had trouble with it. So on this van, I decided to splurge on the heater. I went with the Eberspacher Airtronic. This is the AS3 B2L version, and this one has a thermostat to keep it always at the temperature that you set, and it will automatically adjust the fuel to air ratio depending on your elevation, and it works up to 13,000 feet, so hopefully that won't be an issue for me anymore. I'm hoping to spend a lot of time in this van doing ice climbing, so I need it to have a robust heating system. So along with the heater, I'm going to put in a heated floor, but that's a separate project. I am so grateful that it's finally warm enough that I don't have to wear a coat and gloves all the time. So today I'm going to work on installing my heater. I have all the parts labeled out and put together here, and I'm going to walk through what I've done so far. So here I have the actual heater itself. This little cap was not on there to begin with. I had to put this cap on the end. But from here, this is where the air is going to come in, and this is a little fan where the air comes out and warms up the van. I later found out that I had this backwards. Stay tuned. From this fan, you can take this hose and put it on the end and point the hose to whatever direction you want it to go. On the end of the hose, there's this piece that will slide on right like this into the end after you cut the hose to where the length that you want. But I'm not going to need the extra hose since it's going to go under my passenger seat. So I'm going to find a way to either put this on directly or cut this very short so that this can just sit right on the end. If you choose to use the long hose for the warm air output, there is a clamp that goes with that as well to keep it on. The bottom of the heater has an intake and an exhaust. This pipe is for the exhaust, and it will only fit on one of them. So it won't fit over this bigger one. It has to go on the smaller one. This is the exhaust. Around the exhaust, you need to put a clamp. So before you put it on, you're just going to put that around. Just like that. So you're going to need to figure out how long you want your exhaust to be, and then on the end of your exhaust, you want to put a muffler where you'll need another clamp here and a clamp here, and this will make your exhaust quieter, and then this will be the end that has the little end cap on it. The other connector is for the intake. So this will need to put a clamp and then put it right on like that. And this will also go under the van and be your air intake. Also on the bottom of the heater is this fuel intake where you will put your fuel pump connector. So this fuel pump has a little connector for electricity. You're going to need to run wires from here to your heater and ultimately into your cabin battery to fuel the actual pump that gets gasoline into the heater so that it can burn and give you heat. The heater comes with two different size hoses. This is a 4x1 and this is a 4x1.25. the fuel flows in this direction. So this is the piece that's going to connect to your car fuel. And this piece will connect to the bottom of the heater. Right here. So this piece of the heater is going to be sitting underneath the van. It's going to be pointing down like this. And it comes with a special platform. The metal bit came with the heater. I had to make this little platform to fit underneath my seat properly. It just slides on like this. And then after you put this piece on, that's when you attach your intake and exhaust. And then you will put this down into the hole so that your heater is sitting like this. Here's what the bottom of the heater looks like when it's all connected. The exhaust, the fuel line, and the intake. From the heater, you have this main connector, which connects to all this. Beautiful. So, throw that over there. This piece connects to the heater, right here. From there, depending on the features of your heater, mine came with a lot of pieces that I'm actually not even gonna use, but I'll walk you through what I found for my personal setup. So from this main piece that connects to the heater, it branches off into 3 pieces. So this first one is the smallest. See if I can find the end. There we go. This goes to the fuel pump. So ultimately, this is going to connect. You have to connect it to a special type of connector, but it's going to go into here. Now, the heater came with a fuse box specifically for the fuel pump, but I'm going to connect it to my main cabin battery, and I want all my fuses to be in one space, so I'm not going to use the fuel pump, the fuse that came with it. I'm going to use a fuse in my fuse box. In the little baggie that contains the fuse box that I'm not going to use, it came with this little adapter that I'm going to need to plug these into, and then this will fit right here into the fuel pump and power the pump. If you look closely at this adapter, you'll see that there's a label 1 and 2. The brown goes into the hole labeled 1, and the gray wire goes into the hole labeled 2. But they're going to go in from this side, and you just squeeze them in there and they'll click in place. The next branch is this one. This one ultimately goes to my thermostat. There are several different kinds of thermostat, and this set of wires will go to all the different kinds of thermostat, but you're only going to need one kind of thermostat. So these wires are actually not going to do anything for me, and I just need to tape them away so that they don't get in the way. This is the only one that's going to go with my thermostat. For me, these wires are brown, red, blue and red, blue and black. I figured this out by looking at the instruction manual, which I'll put a link to that in the description, but definitely make sure that you have the right wires set up for your type of thermostat. The thermostat that I have is the Easy Start Pro. And if we open it up, there is the circuit diagram for just my thermostat. Unfortunately, my heater didn't come with this, but it came with the thermostat. And here is the thermostat and the connector. The thermostat comes with also 2 wires. One of them goes to the main unit, so this is going to go together ultimately. And then this one goes to a room temperature sensor, which I am not going to use, so this wire is not going to be useful for me. The final branch terminates here. This goes to a CAN control unit. I think it's the control unit you would use if you were Canadian, maybe? I don't know. but I don't think I have one of these, so this is useless for me as well. But then this piece is important. These two are the positive and negative, red positive, brown negative, that will go into my battery to power the heater. This extra red wire goes to the fuse, which again, I'm not going to use. I'm going to plug this into my cabin fuse with the rest of my fuses for the van. So these two are going to be wired together into a single fuse, positive, negative. The instruction manual that I found online shows you how to connect the fuel line into your return line from your car engine, but if you have a Dodge ProMaster, that's not necessary. You can buy these adapters, and in your fuel tank, there is a special place where you can put this adapter and just snap it on, plug your fuel line into this, and run it straight to your heater without needing to tap into the existing fuel line. Between the driver and passenger seat, underneath this piece, you can find a cap with 3 screws, and if you take them off, you can get access to your fuel tank. This is your fuel tank. This right here is a special adapter that you can use auxiliary fuel items with. For example, your fuel heater. Press on this blue button, pop it off. You have to press on both sides. Comes off easily. There's that. This will plug into your heater, and it just snaps right on. And if you want to get it off later, you just press on this and pull it off. Just like that. I'm going to put the heater here under the passenger seat. So the first step is to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. You can just flip this lever, but make sure it's not connected. And then undo the wires underneath. I already popped those off. And then I'll need to come around and unscrew these to take the seat off. I have the passenger seat removed. The air heater is going to sit right here. And underneath is the muffler, but there's space to drill a hole. I'll show you what I mean. So here's the seat. Directly underneath. That's the muffler. And there's a heat shield around it. But up in here, this is all empty back here. And behind it, up way back up in there, around is empty on the other side of this heat shield. So there's space for the exhaust to come through right here. That will then stick out right here-ish, next to the passenger doors. I ultimately decided to put the exhaust out the driver's side instead. Now it's time for the most exciting part of the installation, cutting a hole in the floor. I started by just marking where I wanted the heater to go, and then cutting out the floor with a box cutter. After double checking that it was going to fit, I started cutting a hole in the floor by drilling a hole big enough for my jigsaw blade to go through, and then following the outline that I made. Before you start drilling and cutting this hole, make absolutely sure that there's nothing underneath, no wires or fuel lines or anything like that. Once you've cut the hole, put some Rust-Oleum on the edges to make sure that it doesn't rust, and then fit everything through the hole and put the heater in place. While you're doing this, make sure the intake, exhaust, and fuel line are pointing the direction you want them to go underneath your van. So here we have the exhaust coming out of my heater, and I'm going to attach it to this bolt that's sticking down right here. But first I need to attach it to the silencer, and then it's going to attach right here like this, and then go out the driver's side of my van. So first I'm going to make this attachment, screw it on, so it can exhaust out there. It was definitely a little challenging to work in the confined space under the van, so any time you're doing something down here, come up with a plan and then bring any tool that you might possibly need and leave it within arm's reach. These parts can go on anywhere, but I tried to use existing screws and screw holes. I made this thing, which is just a board with a bolt through it, so that I can put it through that hole down there. The bolt came out here through this hole, and now I'm going to attach my exhaust pipe. This process is a lot easier if you can get someone to hold the bolt in place from the inside, but I was able to manage without that. So here I have my fuel pump. It is wrapped in the little holder piece that came with it, and that bracket is the bracket that came with the exhaust silencer, but I'm using it for the fuel pump. I'm going to attach the fuel pump to that bolt right there. This piece, it's hard to tell from this angle, but it's actually angling up a little bit, which is what you want. You want the fuel pump to pump from 15 to 35 degrees upward a little bit. So when I attach it here, it's going to be pointing up a little bit, and then I'll attach it to this line, which is going to my heater. This other side is the side that will connect both the electrical right here and the fuel here to the car fuel tank. There's my exhaust, there's the silencer, and it goes out the driver's side. I bought a pack of fuel line connectors. This is, I believe, 5/8 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. And I connected this to the fuel line that came with my heater and the connectors that came with my heater as well. And I'm going to swap out this for this and then run the fuel line under the van and connect it to the fuel pump. While you're attaching this, make sure to push the fuel line under the van where it's going to go. And if you're recording yourself doing this for the entertainment of others, make sure your arm is blocking most of what you're doing to really keep the viewers on their toes. Here under the van, I have the blue line coming from my fuel tank, which I'll connect to this side of the fuel pump. The white line going to my heater, which will go to the far side of my fuel pump. And then this is the electrical for the fuel pump. I need to put a little adapter on it, and then it's going to plug in right here. And to get this down here, I ran it through the same hole as the exhaust from my heater. Here it is all attached with the blue line coming from the fuel tank and the white line going into my heater. The wires coming in to give power to the pump. And finally, I zip tied up the intake and put on the end cap and cut it a little bit too. Well, the good news is that I have my heater installed. It's blowing out hot air and it's fully working. I'm really excited about that. The bad news is that I made a mistake when installing it. This is the back of my passenger seat. And if you look closely at the heater, you can see a fan on the inside. I assumed that this fan blows out air because that's how it worked on my Chinese diesel heater that I had in my last van. But this fan actually pulls air into the heater, and the hot air goes out the other way, so the hot air is blowing towards the front of the van. Yeah, I was so proud of myself for getting my heater installed until I realized my mistake and felt like an absolute idiot. I don't know how I didn't check this. Why would I assume that it would be the same as my Chinese diesel heater? That's a really dumb thing to assume. So I'm telling you this so that you don't make the same mistake as me. Make sure that the warm air is pointing to the back of the van and not the front. Luckily for me, this is going to be pretty easy to resolve. I ordered some tubing that I can put onto the output and just bend it around so that it points back towards the back of the van like this. And then this is the part that came with the heater, and I'm just going to pull this off, put it on this one, and zip tie it in. I can't believe I did that. That was so dumb. My heater is working and blowing out warm air towards the back of the van. Here you can see I just took the hose and ran it from the output and pointed it towards the back of the van. This bit swivels some so you can rotate it a little bit. The heater is on, it's blowing out warm air, and I'll show you how I wired it up. This is the main connector that goes into the heater, and you just plug it in. It's connected to this large strand that then branches off into 3 pieces. This smaller piece comes into a mess right here, and then I fed it back this way, and it goes underneath my van and powers the fuel pump. The next strand comes up and into this mess of wires, which hosts the thermostat right here. The thermostat is on. Ultimately, I need to put it into the wall, but for now it's just sitting on the floor. And finally, the last branch of this, I don't know, 3-pronged Y comes all the way back through here and ends right here and goes into my fuse panel. Well, that's it for the heater installation. I'm glad that I finally got it working. I was really intimidated when I first took the heater out of the box, but once I got going, it actually felt pretty straightforward. All the pieces worked together in only one way, so it was easy to piece it together. Anytime you turn your heater on, make sure to run it for at least 10 minutes to prevent carbon buildup. When it's time to turn the heater off, make sure to do it through the control unit and don't just cut the power, because it has its own shutdown procedure. It needs to do things like clear out residual fuel, so make sure to do it through the control unit and not by just cutting power. That's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.